A call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show. Donald Trump has been selected to retake power, or so that's what they're telling us right now, because a lot can still happen between now and Inauguration Day. And it's important to pay attention to how everybody out there is feeling, because a lot of people woke up today feeling relief. Because, of course, the majority of civilians in the United States of America, despite how they make it seem like there's a lot of Democrat communists, a lot of woke people, the majority of people don't know any of these people. The majority of people would likely select Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. But the narratives that are still floating around are important to pay attention to. And as you watch the alt-right media celebrate, Alex Jones and his team toasting with champagne, Ben Shapiro, well done, God. Russell Brand, God bless America, make Jesus first again. You can feel that there's a lot of baiting going on, a lot of celebrating, and it might be premature because some of the things going on out there, some of the narratives are about Kamala Harris not conceding the election. People are saying not to concede. Other people are now talking about Russian collusion and Russian interference. Now, putting Trump in power does make sense, of course, if we're looking at the Albert Pike World War III narrative. The World War III narrative, which plays out with Israel and Iran, would suck the United States of America right into the center of that. But I'm not convinced yet that we're actually getting a second Donald Trump term. And the reason being may surprise some people out there. But there's still the narrative of the potential assassination of Donald Trump. Because if the deep state really wanted Donald Trump dead, well, third time's a charm, right? As we all know, these secret societies operate in threes. Deaths come in three. And a third assassination attempt before the date of December 17th would throw the United States of America into utter chaos. Because just because Donald Trump won the popular vote and won the electoral vote does not mean that he's the president yet. And I'm not rooting for chaos to actually happen. I'm telling you to pay attention to it because they didn't do all of this buildup to just have everybody take a deep exhale and say, okay, we're going to get our freedoms back. We're going to get free speech back. We're not going to lose the right to bear arms. But what happens if the president-elect dies before the inauguration? What if the president-elect actually dies before December 17th and the Electoral College meets? Now, if you're not familiar, the government website for the Electoral College actually has an article up that says what happens if a candidate dies or becomes incapacitated. And it says, quote, there is no federally required process to follow if a candidate who is projected to receive electoral votes dies or becomes incapacitated before the general election and the meeting of electors. However, individual states may have their own requirements that govern how electors must vote at the meeting of electors. In 1872, when Horace Greeley passed away between Election Day and the meeting of electors, the electors who were slated to vote for Greeley voted for various candidates, including Greeley. The votes cast for Greeley were not counted due to a House resolution passed regarding the matter. See the full Electoral College vote counts for president and vice president in the 1872 election. We don't know what would happen if a candidate who dies after or becomes incapacitated between the meeting of electors and the counting of electoral votes in Congress. The Constitution is silent on whether this candidate meets the definition of president-elect or vice president-elect. If the candidate with the majority of the electoral votes is considered president-elect before the counting of electoral votes in Congress, Rule 3 of the 20th Amendment applies. The section states that the vice president-elect will become president if the president-elect dies or becomes incapacitated. If a winning presidential candidate dies or becomes incapacitated between the counting of electoral votes in the Congress and the inauguration, the vice president-elect becomes president according to the 20th Amendment. So while most people would assume that that would mean that J.D. Vance would become president, we have to wait for December 17th. And this could very well be the calm before the storm, or I could very well be exaggerating. But there's so much predictive programming that I've shown you over the years with Donald Trump and an assassination. And it's not just the fake assassination attempts that occurred. There's literally parallels that they've created to make Donald Trump like Abraham Lincoln. There's lots of parallels with the Civil War. There's lots of parallels with Donald Trump always standing in front of that picture of Abraham Lincoln. Don't forget the Nutcracker performance where they showed Donald Trump as the Mouse King or the Rat King assassinated right in front of that picture of Abraham Lincoln. Now, we can look at the stuff that's out there and we could say, well, maybe they won't actually assassinate Donald Trump before then, but that would make the most sense. I mean, they've already attempted to take his life supposedly twice, right? So why would anybody out there think that he's in the clear? I mean, people will be, and if you're talking about how to bring about order out of chaos, the most chaos you could possibly imagine would be something happening to Donald Trump between now, when the majority of people supposedly voted for him, and the majority of people, everybody feels this sigh in the air. Everybody, you could feel it. You could hear people like, oh, what a relief. They didn't rig the election. That's what they're all saying, because everybody out there knows or knew that there's no way that if the election was real, that anybody would actually vote for Kamala Harris. Just like nobody would have voted for Joe Biden. So everybody out there who believes in the Constitution, they're of course naturally, because they're being deceived, actually believe and like Donald Trump. So they're all feeling a sigh of relief because they're saying, wow, the mainstream, you could feel it. They're saying, wow, the mainstream media is actually reporting that Donald Trump won. Yeah, we haven't heard Kamala Harris, as of me recording this, concede the election yet, but you feel the sigh of relief everyone has because they all thought that there was going to be major manipulation, that they were going to tell everybody out there that, Kamala Harris won in a landslide, something that they would deny the outcome of. And of course, we're seeing Democrats deny the outcome of this already, talking about Russia collusion. This is all stuff that's been ingrained in their heads. Bomb threats were supposedly called, and all these psyops that the government themselves put out there. So it's very important to note, because the majority of people think that after the election, that person's automatically the president of the United States of America. There can be disputes. Don't forget of all this stuff that they've done already with trying to prosecute Donald Trump and throw him in jail. You're going to hear the stories begin. This is not over. This is not just going to be 2 months of waiting for Donald Trump to go into power. We know that order out of chaos is needed. And there is going to be chaos in the next couple of months. You could guarantee it. It's just a matter of how do they do it. So I'd be very surprised in the next 2 months if we hear nothing, if it's just silence waiting for him to take office in January. I think before December 17th, we're going to hear something go on before the electors meet. The electors have to meet in all 50 states and the District of Columbia and cast their ballots, one vote each for president and vice president, and then transmit these votes to national activists and the president of the Senate in D.C. And oh, by the way, who is the president of the Senate in D.C.? That would be Kamala Harris, the president of the Senate. So there's a lot of twists and turns that can be taken. I think when you watched how people are responding to this is exactly what they want. They want people celebrating. They want people feeling like Donald Trump is going to save the day. And nobody out there is actually thinking that something can actually occur between now and Inauguration Day. But too many seeds have been planted for something big to go on. I'm not buying it one bit. Now, the other thing that's out there that we've heard whispers about, and everybody has mentioned it a few times over the last 4 years, especially with the outbreak that occurred, is the president invoking emergency powers. And if you didn't hear, the U.S. military is testing nuclear missiles. This is just a quote. Your take on nuclear missiles or not is one thing, but this is something that's out there. The U.S. was testing nuclear missiles hours after the polls closed. So they're putting seeds out there in people's minds that we could suddenly get sucked into World War III and the president, Biden, could declare emergency powers. There could be another outbreak. There could be many things that happen. They're not done playing with people by any stretch of the imagination. This right here feels like the calm before the storm, because everybody out there feels this sense of relief because there isn't a dispute going on yet. There isn't any type of controversy. It was just pretty much a landslide for Donald Trump. So people out there are trusting in the system again, saying, look, they couldn't rig it. It was too big to rig. But the narratives with the assassination, the electoral vote on December the 17th, and remember, if they wanted Donald Trump dead, he'd be dead. But why would they kill him before the election? What would cause more chaos? Killing him before the actual election or killing him after the citizens in the country supposedly vote him in to be the president and before he could take office again, before he's officially put in on December 17th, something happens to him. And the Constitution itself doesn't state what the resolution would be. That's why I read that to you. What were some of the quotes in that? What happens if a candidate dies or becomes incapacitated? And for anybody out there that wants to find this actual article, it's archives.gov/electoral college/FAQ. And what does it say? It says, we don't know what would happen if a candidate who dies after or becomes incapacitated between the meeting of electors and the counting of electoral votes in Congress. The Constitution is silent on whether this candidate meets the definition of president-elect or vice president-elect. So it's not as simple as saying, well, if something happens to Trump in the next couple of weeks, that J.D. Vance would take office. It's not that simple. In fact, nothing like it has happened before. And guess what? If you're not paying attention, the things that we're seeing happen on a day in, day out basis is nothing like we've ever seen before. And when the government website themselves says there's no federally required process to follow if a candidate who is projected to receive electoral votes dies or becomes incapacitated between the general election and the meeting of electors, well, you should look at that and say, I guess there's a first time for everything, right? Maybe, maybe not. Just my take on things, watching how people are responding, knowing how wicked these people actually are, how many people out there are tweeting things about God, and how many of these celebrities like Russell Brand or this alt-right media is thanking God, saying it's a miracle from God. You could feel like something is brewing. I believe something is definitely brewing, and I'll be talking about it more over the next couple of weeks. Don't forget, with the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, for years and years and years, me and many other people out there have been talking about the predictive programming with an assassination of Donald Trump. Now, when it actually occurred, the attempted assassination attempt, it was very clear that it was a false flag, that they did that to ignite more fury, to build more support for Donald Trump, because the support was already insane of how badly people were clinging to Donald Trump because of how deliberately bad our government has made our way of life in America over the last 4 years, that the fake assassination attempt only gave Trump more credibility in people's eyes. If you want to bring order out of chaos, if you want to divide this country into two separate countries and bring about civil unrest, that would be the perfect way to do it, because then guess what happens? We don't know what happens. We don't know who they tell us the next president is. In fact, if